Well, hello once again, YouTube. This is my review of the case Small Stockman. I think this one was made in about 2010. Let me open her up here so you can see the tang stamp. For those of you that don't know, it's kind of buried up in here, but you can read the dots and the way case is written, and you can get on casecollectors.net or any number of sites, and it will tell you how to date a case knife based on those series of dots and the way case is written. At one time, Case actually started putting the dates on these little knives, and they found that people just really didn't like that. They preferred the symbols, so they kind of went back to that. You'll notice that I got a Zippo lighter back here in the background. The reason I have that back there is because Case knives are now owned by Zippo. And so they're all one and the same company, which is maybe kind of cool. I don't know. I've heard a lot of people say that the quality of Case knives has dropped over the years. That may be true, that may not be true, but I can tell you firsthand that this little Stockman is a fantastically built little knife. You look back here, everything's smooth and even. These are what they call Durlin scales, some kind of plastic, jigged plastic, which actually itself is a pretty traditional knife cover. When we deal with a little knife like this, we got to talk about philosophy of use. And I know there was a phase that knives went through for a while where they had these really monstrous overbuilt folders like Medford, I think the Medford Praetorian and knives like that were just these really big, bulky blocks of steel. And all that's kind of settled down. And then there kind of has been a move back toward traditional knives. And to me, this little guy is about as traditional as it gets. I'm going to do this off camera because space will allow it. But I'm going to show you we have a sheep's foot blade. And we also have, excuse me here for a minute, we've got a pen blade, which is a pretty useful little blade. And then we have our main drop point blade, which I showed you earlier. And now you'll notice this knife that the blade steel is not super highly polished or anything like that. That's because this is from what they call, I think, the Workman series or American Workman series of knife, which is where this little case knife sits in their lineup. I think they still have something like that, pretty similar. Anyway, I've carried this knife for quite a while, and I made it a point to only carry it and not any other knife. And I found that about 99%, maybe a little less, 98% of the cutting that I wanted to do, I could accomplish with this little knife. I could get it done. From cutting apples, cutting open boxes, stripping wire, all kinds of things. I could do it with this little knife. I think there was only maybe one or two times that I found myself really wanting a bigger knife. And I happened to have one in my truck, and I reached over and got it. But for the most part, this little knife, it's razor sharp, and it'll do everything I want it to do. I can tell you for a fact, if you pull this little guy out, you are not going to scare anybody. That's for sure. It is very work friendly, and it's very useful, like for food prep or anything like that. Now, it's definitely not, doesn't have the chopping power of a Ginsu knife or anything like that, but it'll get all your tasks done. And at least for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but when I take this knife out of my pocket, I get a good warm feeling just looking at it and holding it. And you think a little knife like this is maybe not a big deal, but it really is. I talked to somebody over at Case a pretty good while back, and they said it's a lot harder to make these little knives like this than it is the bigger knives. Because there's a lot of engineering that goes into fitting all those blades in such a tiny little space. That is just a really narrow little area to cram all those blades into. There's a slight bit of blade rub. It's not too bad, you know. It's when you're trying to cram that many blades into such a tiny space, you're gonna get that, you know. But I tell you, if you really want to enjoy a knife and really take your time cutting with it, and using it, I think you'd really enjoy this knife. Another knife that I like is the Peanut. I have one of those, and I'll do a video on it later. But it's actually a little bigger than this knife. And the Peanut, everybody says it's pretty tiny. Well, hence the name Peanut. It's about the size of a small peanut. And this knife is even smaller. Makes my thumbs look huge. But there's another philosophy. When you take this knife out of your pocket and you're going to cut with such a small, sharp knife, you have to be careful. You have to be mindful. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. And I think that that's a miniature dichotomy for the way we live our lives. As we're in a big rush, we want to whip out these tactical folders in 1/10 of a second, and we want to slice molecules and, you know, cut open a cantaloupe with one swipe. You're not going to be able to do this with a little knife like this, but you will be able to cut open a cantaloupe and or an apple or an orange or your lunch or whatever. You just have to be a little more careful and mindful about it. I really find little knives like this really, really enjoyable. I like to whittle with these little knives. That's a lot of fun. And they're really easy to sharpen. In case they get a kind of a bum rap and they say, oh, they don't use good steels and this and that. This is their surgical steel, but it holds a really good edge, and a couple of swipes on a strop and you're back to as good as it ever was. In fact, they tell you, a lot of people don't realize this, that you really shouldn't sharpen your knife that often. You've probably seen your grandpa's old knife where the blade is just wore down to just a tiny little sliver. That's because a lot of those guys used to sharpen all the time. And then my grandpa, he knew about stropping, and he would strop it on his jeans or a piece of cowhide laying around or something like that. And it was a lot better to strop a knife than it is to resharpen it. Make your knife last a lot longer. Anyway, this is the case Small Stockman. Thought y'all might like to take a look at it, and I really appreciate you watching this video. Y'all take care. Bye.